My wife named her affair partner on her $1 million life insurance policy. I was her caregiver for 4 years. The letter arrived on a Thursday. From the insurance company, a name I recognized because I had been paying premiums on this policy alongside Rachel for 7 years. The letter said my claim had been denied. It said the current named beneficiary was a Mr. Daniel Reeves. It said Daniel Reeves had filed a claim within 3 weeks of Rachel's death, and as the legally designated beneficiary, his claim superseded mine. I stood at the kitchen counter where I had made her tea every morning for 4 years, and I read the letter 3 times because the first and second readings produced something my brain would not accept. The number is $1 million. That is the specific number. I want you to hold it because I'm going to tell you what 4 years of caregiving for a woman you love actually costs, not in money, and I want the number to mean what it means when set against what follows. In the first 5 minutes of this story, I need to give you 4 facts because everything else is built on them. Fact 1. Rachel and I were married for 11 years. She was diagnosed with stage 2 ovarian cancer 6 months into year 8. Fact 2. For the following 4 years, I reduced my working hours, managed her medical schedule, attended every appointment, administered her medication, made the 3 a.m. calls, and rebuilt my professional life around what she needed. This was not a sacrifice I resented. I want to be precise about that. I did not do it waiting for something in return. I did it because I loved her and she was sick, and being the person who stays is, I believe, simply what loving someone requires. Fact 3. 18 months before she died during a period of remission, during a period where we believed she was going to survive, Rachel changed the beneficiary on the policy I had been paying premiums on for 7 years. She changed it from my name to Daniel Reeves' name. She made the call at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was at the pharmacy picking up her medication. Fact 4. Her mother Patricia witnessed her sign the beneficiary change document and co-signed the witness line. She did not tell me. She has not told me. She has not told me. I found out from the insurance company's records 8 months after the letter arrived. Let me tell you how we got here. Rachel was funny in a way that ambushed you, not performing funny the kind that arrived in the middle of ordinary sentences and made you feel like you'd found something valuable when you weren't looking for it. She was a project manager for a mid-sized logistics firm. She was organized the way some people are organized, as a personality trait rather than a coping mechanism. The fridge was alphabetical. I thought this was a joke the first time I saw it until she explained without irony that it genuinely reduced decision fatigue in the morning. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party in 2010. She was wearing green. I remember this because she told me later she always wore green to parties where she didn't know many people because it made her easy to locate if someone needed to find her. I found her within 20 minutes and I didn't leave her side for the rest of the night. We were married in 2012. We lived in a 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Columbus that we had chosen because the street had mature trees, and we both felt independently that mature trees were a good sign about a neighborhood's intentions. We were not perfect together. We argued about money in year 3 and about time in year 6, the specific argument of 2 people who both work too much and have not fully learned how to be in a room together without being productive. But the marriage was real. I want to say that because everything that comes later requires you to understand what was being erased. The marriage was real. The love was real. The love was real. I am not saying this to generate sympathy for the person I was before the diagnosis. I am saying it because the specific devastation of what Rachel did to me requires you to understand what she had access to. She had access to all of it, every corner, every room. The diagnosis arrived in February of the 9th year, stage 2 ovarian cancer. The oncologist was a careful woman who delivered the information with the specific combination of directness and compassion that I have since learned is a trained skill, the kind of doctor who tells you something terrible and manages to make you feel that you are not facing it alone even when the room is exactly as empty as it was before the news. We drove home in silence. Not because we had nothing to say, because neither of us had located yet the particular register in which you discuss this kind of information with the person you have chosen to spend your life with. We sat in the driveway for about 20 minutes before going inside. I remember the car clock reading 7:44 p.m. I remember thinking that when we left the house that morning I had not known. Over the next 3 weeks, we made decisions that in retrospect defined the following 4 years. Rachel wanted to continue working as long as possible. I restructured my consulting hours to overlap with her treatment schedule. We told our immediate families, but not our wider social circle, a decision Rachel made and that I supported because she explained she did not want to be the subject of a narrative she couldn't control. I understood this completely. I would have said the same. The first round of treatment began in March. I attended every session. I sat in the treatment room reading or working or just sitting because she had told me in the second week that having me there made the hours feel shorter. I took this as information about what she needed and I acted on it every time. I want to tell you what year 1 actually looked like from inside it because caregiving is a word that carries its full weight only when you open it up. By March, I had moved my primary client work to evenings and weekends, and Rachel's treatment schedule required 3 clinic visits per week in the first phase, each lasting between 4 and 6 hours. I drove her. I parked, I went in, I sat. On treatment days, I did not schedule calls. On non-treatment days, I caught up. This was the rhythm for the first 18 months. The 3 a.m. calls were the other rhythm. Not every night, some months, 3 times a week. The specific biological disruptions of the treatment created a pattern of crises that arrived without warning, usually between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. when her body was doing something that required immediate attention or that she could not manage alone. I became calibrated to the specific sounds of the house at night, the ones that were normal and the ones that weren't, the ones that meant I should get up immediately. I'm going to describe one specific Tuesday night in October of year 2 because it is the night I think about most when I try to locate the precise texture of what those years cost. It was 2:47 a.m. I know this because I checked the time when I heard the sound from the bathroom, a specific kind of sound that I had learned to read as serious rather than manageable. I got up. I was wearing the same t-shirt I had slept in for 3 nights because the laundry had not happened. The laundry was one of the things that fell out of the schedule during bad weeks, and that week had been a bad week, and that week had been a bad week. The bathroom was cold. I had been meaning to fix the heating in that room for 4 months. I had written it on a list, and the list was in the kitchen drawer where lists go to be remembered too late. Rachel was sitting on the floor, not in distress past the crisis point, into the specific exhaustion that comes after it. I sat down on the tile next to her. The tile was very cold. I didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. We sat like that for about 20 minutes. At some point she said, "I'm sorry this is the night you're having." I said, "I'm not having a bad night. I'm sitting on a cold floor." She laughed. It was very quiet, just a small sound in a cold bathroom at 2:47 a.m. I have thought about that laugh approximately once a week for the last 3 years. When I think about what those years cost, I think about that floor and that laugh and the fact that I was glad to be there. Not performing gladness, actually glad. Because she was laughing, and that meant she was going to be okay until morning. I did not know at 2:47 a.m. on that October Tuesday that Rachel was 6 weeks away from the first time she called Daniel. The remission news arrived in April of year 3. The scans showed a significant reduction. The oncologist said the words, "responding well to treatment," and used the phrase cautiously optimistic. I wrote those words down in the margins of the clinic notes I kept. I wrote them twice. I sat in the car afterward and felt something I did not fully trust, because I had learned that hope in this context was a resource with specific risks attached, the risk of investing in a future that might not arrive. But I invested. We both did. Rachel went back to work in June part-time initially, then full-time by September. I began rebuilding my client base more aggressively. We planned a holiday, something small, a long weekend, the first trip we had taken together in 3 years. We went to Vermont. We sat on the porch of a rented cabin on the second evening, and I thought, this is what we were moving toward. We made it here. I did not know that Rachel had been speaking to Daniel for 2 months before the Vermont trip. I did not know that the specific lightness I observed in her during that weekend, the way she seemed less burdened, more present, was not, or not entirely, the relief of remission. Some of it was the particular energy of a person who has made a decision they believe resolves something. She had made a decision during remission. While I was rebuilding the practice and planning Vermont and writing cautiously optimistic twice in the margin of a clinic note, she had made a decision about her money and about the person she wanted it to go to. His name was Daniel Reeves. I met him twice. The first time was at a work event of Rachel's in year 9. She introduced us briefly, told me he had been a colleague from a previous firm, seemed pleasant and unremarkable. The second time was at the hospital near the end of year 10. He had stopped by, he said, to check on her. I thanked him for coming. I meant it. That is the full extent of my direct experience of Daniel before the letter from the insurance company. What I subsequently discovered through the legal process and through the IFA documentation that was subpoenaed is substantially different from the version I had been given. Daniel and Rachel had been in contact since before the cancer diagnosis. Not simply as former colleagues checking in as a sustained private correspondence that predated the diagnosis by 24 months, and that had continued through the entire illness with a frequency and an intimacy I could not have imagined from the version of the relationship she had presented to me. The specific nature of what they were to each other, whether it was a full affair throughout or something that changed in character during the illness, I genuinely do not know. The legal process did not require me to establish that. What the legal process established was the financial architecture of what they had built together, and the financial architecture tells its own story about the intentions involved. The independent financial advisor was a man named Stuart. Rachel had been referred to him through Daniel. This is documented in an email from Daniel to Rachel dated 16 months before her death, in which he recommended Stuart by name and described him as someone who could help Rachel structure things independently from any joint arrangements. Stuart had facilitated the beneficiary designation change. He had also opened a separate personal investment account in Rachel's name alone, using funds that had been moved from our joint savings in irregular amounts over 14 months. The total moved was $218,000. I did not notice this because the amounts moved ranged between $3,000 and $12,000 and were moved on dates when I was either at the clinic with her or managing something else in the household. The pattern was designed to be invisible within the normal variability of a joint account that supported a household with a seriously ill member. The amounts looked like medical costs. The timing looked like medical timing. Stuart, when contacted by my solicitor, said he had no obligation to disclose independent account arrangements to a third party. He is technically correct about this. He is also a man who had known when accepting Rachel as a client that she was married and that the funds she was moving came from a joint account. He had chosen to apply the letter of his obligations and not their spirit. Rachel had been doing this for 14 months. Every month, in the weeks when I was most occupied with her care, she had moved a portion of our money. Every month she had called Daniel. The insurance company's change of beneficiary log is a document I have read probably 40 times. It is 2 pages. It contains the date, the time, the contact method, and the identification verification steps completed. The date is a Tuesday in November of the 3rd year of treatment. The time is 3:17 p.m. I have the pharmacy receipt from that Tuesday. I have it because I am meticulous about receipts, not out of suspicion, out of a household habit I developed when we were first managing her prescription costs and needed accurate records for the insurance reimbursement process. Pharmacy is 11 minutes from the house. I left the house at 3:08 p.m. I know this because of a text I sent to Rachel's nurse coordinator at 3:09 p.m. from my car outside the pharmacy. It is in my phone records. The receipt is timestamped 3:24 p.m. At 3:07 p.m. I was in the pharmacy. At 3:17 p.m. Rachel called the insurance company's beneficiary services line. The call duration was 9 minutes, according to her phone records. She had completed the change by 3:26 p.m. I was still in the pharmacy. She had calculated the window. I sat with that information for 2 days before I could say it out loud to anyone, because I couldn't process it. Because processing it required me to understand that she had, at some point, calculated the specific errand she sent me on and the time it would take, and made her call inside that window. Not impulsively, not in crisis. With calculation, I am going to tell you about a night 11 months after Rachel died, because it is the night I understood the full weight of what had been done. I had not been sleeping well since the letter, not dramatically not lying awake in distress, just not going fully under, surfacing at odd hours and lying in the specific silence of a house that had been one thing and was now another. At 2:11 a.m. on a Wednesday in November, I got up and went to the kitchen. I made tea, the same tea I had made every morning for 4 years, the specific brand she had preferred, which I had continued buying without deciding to. The kitchen was dark except for the under-cabinet light that came on when the kettle was near. I had been meaning to replace that light for 4 months. There was a list in the drawer. I sat at the kitchen table, the table where Rachel and I had eaten most of our meals, the table where I had helped her review her medications in the first year, spreading them out and cataloging what was what and when it was taken, a process that had taken about 40 minutes and which we had done together so she would know the names of everything and not feel like the medicines were happening to her rather than for her. I sat there and I looked at the kitchen that was mine and had been ours, and I felt the specific thing of understanding that the person who had sat across from me at this table had been at the same time calling Daniel, that both things had been happening in the same hours and the same rooms, that I had been sitting across from the truth of her life and seeing something else entirely. I stayed at the table until 4 a.m. Then I went back to bed. The next day I called a solicitor. Rachel's mother, Patricia, was 63 when Rachel died. She lived 40 minutes away and had been present throughout the illness, a supportive presence that I had genuinely valued because it relieved some of the care burden on the worst days. I had liked Patricia. That is an important sentence. I had liked her. What I found in the insurance company records and the beneficiary change documentation was her name on the witness line. She had been present when Rachel made the change. She had signed her own name as witness. The insurance company's process required an independent witness who was not the policyholder and not the beneficiary. Patricia qualified. She had provided her signature. She had driven 40 minutes to witness her daughter divert $1 million away from her daughter's husband, a man she had sat beside at hospital bedsides for 4 years, and she had then driven home and had dinner and had not at any point in the 11 months before Rachel died or the 8 months after said a word. Her first words to me when I told her what I had found: Rachel wanted to protect what was hers. You need to respect that. She said this with the specific steadiness of someone who has been rehearsing the sentence. The pharmacy receipt is a piece of paper the size of my hand. It is printed on thermal paper, the kind that fades if you keep it too long. I had kept it because Rachel's prescriptions had been part of our reimbursement claim system, and I retained all medical receipts from that period in a folder organized by month. When I found it while going through those records 8 months after the insurance letter and held it next to the insurance company's change log with the 3:17 p.m. timestamp, I understood something that I had not, until that moment, fully formed. She had sent me to the pharmacy. She had asked me to go that afternoon. She had said her prescription was ready and she was tired, and would I mind? I had gone immediately. I had been glad to go because she was tired and it was something I could do. She had sent me to the pharmacy so that she could make the call in an empty house. This is not a discovery that arrived with noise. It arrived in absolute silence. I was sitting at my desk on a Sunday morning with 2 pieces of paper and a very clear view of a Tuesday afternoon in November when my wife, who I was caring for, had made a telephone call she needed me not to be there for and had arranged for me not to be there. I sat with those 2 pieces of paper for a long time. Then I put them in an envelope. Then I called my solicitor and asked for an emergency appointment. 3 weeks after Rachel's funeral, which I had arranged and paid for, and where Patricia had sat in the front pew beside me, Daniel filed his insurance claim. He did not contact me before filing. He did not acknowledge having met me. He submitted his documentation as the designated beneficiary and requested full disbursement. The insurance company notified me of the competing interests. As a courtesy, they were not legally required to do this, but a case manager named Helen called me because she said the circumstances seemed unusual enough that she felt I should be aware. Helen is the person in this story I am most grateful for. She is the one person who paused and made a phone call that was not required. Daniel's supporting documentation included a letter from Stuart, the IFA, confirming his advisory relationship with Rachel and his facilitation of the beneficiary designation. The letter was written on firm letterhead and used careful, professional language to describe a financial arrangement that had been built on the premise that I did not know it existed. Daniel's explanation when my solicitor made initial contact was delivered via his own solicitor. My client is the legally designated beneficiary of the policy. He is honoring the express wishes of the deceased. Honoring her wishes. The will's residual clause was something I had not examined until my solicitor asked me to produce a copy of Rachel's full estate documentation. The codicil and amendment to the original will had been executed 12 months before her death. It removed the residual clause that had directed any estate assets not specifically bequeathed to pass to me, a surviving spouse. The codicil redirected the residual estate to Rachel's mother, Patricia. This was not, in itself, a legally contestable act. A person may direct their estate as they choose. What it functioned as, in the context of everything else, was a surgical removal of the fallback position I would have had if the insurance challenge succeeded partially. The insurance was removed from my claim by the beneficiary change. The residual estate was removed from my claim by the codicil. Both changes made at the same approximate period. Both designed to ensure that in the event of Rachel's death, nothing material passed to me by default. My solicitor looked at the codicil for a long time. Then she said, they anticipated the challenge. The architecture was built to survive a challenge. She was right. It was. But they had not anticipated the pharmacy receipt. In the 3 weeks between Rachel's death and Daniel's insurance claim, Patricia had made 4 telephone calls to me. Each call covered different topics: funeral logistics, estate paperwork, Rachel's personal effects. Each call also contained, in passing, some version of a suggestion that I should give myself time to grieve before making any decisions about financial or legal matters. She had said, Rachel wouldn't have wanted you to spend this time in solicitors' offices. She had said, the legal process can wait. The grief can't. She had said, I know how disorienting this kind of loss is. Please just let yourself feel it before you do anything practical. These are things a grieving mother might say to a grieving husband. They are also precisely the messages that would prevent a surviving spouse from instructing a solicitor within the window that might have affected the timeline of Daniel's claim. I do not know if they were calculated. I know they were said, I know their effect. I cannot, with complete certainty, distinguish between Patricia's grief and Patricia's strategy. I have stopped trying. By month 2 after the insurance letter, Daniel had a solicitor, a claim in process, and the legal framework of the beneficiary designation on his side. Patricia had the codicil directing the residual estate to herself. Swart had the professional cover of having followed his client's instructions within the scope of his engagement. Daniel had begun spending. This I know because the financial investigation subsequently identified transactions from his accounts in the period. A deposit, a car. The specific activity of someone who has received news they expected to be good and is behaving accordingly. Patricia had been to an estate agent. Not to buy to discuss the property timeline of an estate whose residual clause now directed to her. She had a conversation about values and timelines and what these sorts of matters typically required. All three of them, in the months between the letter and the pharmacy receipt, believed the architecture had held. They were waiting for OP to run out of money for legal fees or to accept the loss as the documented wishes of his late wife. They were sitting in certainty. I was sitting in a Sunday morning with 2 pieces of paper. The night before my solicitor's first hearing, the Monday before the tribunal began the full review, I sat in the bedroom for a long time after dark, not in the bed. In the chair by the window where Rachel used to sit in the mornings with her first coffee before everything, before the illness when the mornings were ordinary. The chair smelled of nothing. Whatever it had smelled of had faded over the years since she sat there regularly. I noticed this specifically, that I had been expecting the chair to carry something and it didn't anymore. That the evidence of her occupancy had left the physical world while I had not been paying attention. I thought about the 3:17 p.m. timestamp. I thought about the specific kindness of her voice when she asked me to go to the pharmacy the way she had said please, and the fact that I had gone immediately gladly because she was tired and I could do something for her. I thought about what that phone call felt like from her side. The house empty, the call made, the thing done. Whether she felt relief or guilt or some combination I couldn't access from this chair. I thought about 2:47 a.m. on the October Tuesday and the cold bathroom floor and the small laugh. Both things were real. The laugh was real and the 3:17 p.m. call was real, and I was a person who had to hold both of them in the same body. I stayed in that chair until the light started changing. Then I went downstairs and made tea and drove to the solicitor's office. My solicitor's name is Naomi. She is methodical in the way that calm people are methodical, not slow, not cautious as a substitute for competence, but thorough with a specific purposefulness. When I showed her the pharmacy receipt and the insurance timestamp, she read both documents without speaking, then placed them side by side on her desk and said, "Tell me every other timestamp you have." We spent the next 3 hours going through the chronology. By the end of it, Naomi had a document that placed me at the pharmacy or in the car or at a clinic or on a documented phone call at the time of every significant financial transaction Rachel had made across the 14 months of the scheme. Not every transaction, but enough. Enough to establish a pattern of deliberate timing that Rachel's significant financial actions disproportionately occurred when I was documented as elsewhere. "This is not a clean case," Naomi said at the end of the 3 hours. "Nothing involving a deceased person's intentions is clean. But the pattern is visible and the pharmacy receipt is specific. We filed. The insurance company's case review was triggered by the pharmacy receipt and the corresponding phone record. The combination of receipt placing OP elsewhere and a phone record confirming the call's timing created a factual basis for contesting whether Rachel had been free from duress or influence in making the change. This is not the argument Naomi made. The argument she made was more specific, that the beneficiary change had been executed in circumstances that constituted constructive undue influence, and that the change was made during a period when Rachel was a seriously ill person in a care relationship of significant power imbalance, and that the timing evidence suggested the change had been deliberately managed around the principal carer's absence. The insurance company's investigator, a woman named Karen, who turned out to be extraordinarily thorough, requested the IFA correspondence in full. Swart's documentation, once produced under legal process, showed Daniel's original referral email in full. The email that described Rachel's need to structure things independently from any joint arrangements. Karen looked at that email and made a note. The note said, "Awareness of pre-existing arrangement." Daniel's solicitor described this characterization as speculative. Karen's second note said, "Solicitor's objection noted." The full IFA correspondence ran to 43 pages. Naomi read them all. I read them all. There is a specific experience of reading 43 pages of documentation relating to a financial arrangement your wife built with another man, an arrangement designed to redirect the product of your shared life to someone else, and I will not describe it in detail except to say that the feelings it produces are not clean or single. They are layered in a way that makes them difficult to name individually. Betrayed sits next to grief, sits next to a kind of dark administrative clarity where you stop feeling anything and just read. The 43 pages contain one document that Naomi said changed the weight of everything. It was an email from Rachel to Stuart, sent 8 months before her death, in which she described her reasons for the current arrangements in terms that included the phrase, "Marcus would not understand what I needed this to be. Marcus is my name." She had known I would not understand. She had known because she had made a decision that was, by its nature, impossible to understand, that 4 years of being cared for had not changed what she had decided to do with the financial product of our shared life. That the love I had given her was real, and she had received it, and that receiving it had not changed the decision. Naomi said, "This email is not helpful to their case." She was right, in the courtroom sense. In the other sense is that email cost me something I am still accounting for. The witness signature on the beneficiary change form was the element Naomi described as the cleanest legal thread in the whole picture. Patricia had signed as an independent witness. She was Rachel's mother, a relationship that, while not legally disqualifying in all jurisdictions, was directly relevant to the question of whether she could be considered independent in the context of a financial arrangement of this nature. Independent witness is, by convention, someone without a material interest in the transaction and without a relationship of influence to the person making the change. Patricia had a material interest. The codicil directed the residual estate to her. She had a relationship of influence. She was Rachel's mother and had been an active participant in the illness period. She had signed as an independent witness while holding both of those relationships to the transaction. The insurance company's legal review found that the witness designation was improper given Patricia's position as a beneficiary of the estate. The beneficiary change executed with an improperly designated witness was contestable on procedural grounds independently of the pharmacy receipt evidence. Naomi said, "The witness line changes everything." She was right. Daniel's insurance claim was formally denied 7 months after the review began. The grounds were two. First, the procedural invalidity created by Patricia's improper witness designation. Second, the undue influence finding generated by the timestamp evidence and the IFA correspondence, which together established that the beneficiary change had been made in circumstances the insurance company's policy terms required to be free from. Daniel's response via his solicitor was to request a regulatory appeal. The insurance company's response to the appeal was to add the IFA correspondence, including the independently from any joint arrangements email to the appeal file. Daniel's solicitor withdrew from the appeal within 10 days. The $1 million was not dispersed to Daniel. There were also consequences that the insurance outcome did not fully cover. The IFA correspondence, once produced in legal proceedings, was reviewed by Karen for any indication of professional misconduct. Stewart was referred to the Financial Conduct Authority. His registration is under review. The independently from any joint arrangements email is now part of that review file. Daniel had spent money in anticipation of the disbursement. He had made financial commitments against an expected receipt. Those commitments became his to manage. I do not know the full extent of what that cost him. I have the insurance denial letter. It is in the same folder as the pharmacy receipt. Patricia did not face criminal charges. I want to be accurate about that. What she faced was the specific collapse of the position she had been holding. Her improper witness designation was documented in the insurance company's formal finding. The finding referenced her by name and described her role with precision. This document is public in the sense that legal findings are available to parties involved in related proceedings. The codicil which directed the residual estate to Patricia was challenged separately on the grounds that Rachel had lacked independent legal advice when executing it, given the circumstances of her illness and the financial architecture being built around it. The codicil challenge took 14 months to resolve. It was upheld. The residual estate, now restored to its original direction, passed to me as surviving spouse. Patricia called me once after the finding. She said, "I love my daughter. Everything I did was because I loved her." I said, "I know. I meant it. I believe she loved Rachel. I also believe that the love and the actions are not the same thing, and that loving someone does not license every action taken in their name." I said what I said and I ended the call. I have not heard from her since. The insurance company's formal finding documents in their specific legal language the following: that the beneficiary designation change was executed in procedurally improper circumstances, that the timestamp evidence established a pattern of deliberate exclusion of the surviving spouse, and that the IFA correspondence revealed prior planning that constituted grounds for the undue influence finding. This document names me. It describes what was done. It uses the word exclusion. It uses the phrase deliberate management of circumstances. These are specific words in a formal document that exists independently of my account of what happened. I had been made into a person whose wife had chosen with calculation to redirect what they had built together. That version of me had been placed in the record by 3 people who coordinated to make it stick. The insurance company's finding is the record that says that is not the complete version. Here is what the timestamps say. I read the finding 3 times. I kept it. I put it in the folder with the pharmacy receipt and the insurance denial letter and the IFA email with my name in it. I redecorated the bedroom 18 months after the finding. Not dramatically, I repainted one wall a different color. The chair by the window I moved to the hallway. Not because I wanted to erase it from the room, but because the hallway has better morning light and I had started leaving my coffee there in the mornings and it made sense to have the chair where the habit already was. I kept the kitchen table. I still eat most meals there. The under cabinet light was finally replaced. I called someone in April, the same month as the finding. I also found the list in the drawer and crossed off the bathroom heating, which I had sorted in January. Some things resolve without the drama of the situation around them. I have been seeing someone since last summer. Her name is Petra. She is a structural engineer, and she finds the organization of load-bearing walls genuinely interesting, which I find genuinely interesting in turn. We are careful with each other in the way of people who have both been through something difficult and know that the care is not optional. She knows about Rachel. She knows about the insurance. She asked good questions the first time I told her and has not needed to revisit it since. The pharmaceutical receipts for Rachel's treatment period are still in the folder. The folder is in the filing cabinet in the spare room. I do not look at it often. When I do, the first thing I see is the receipt from the Tuesday. The pharmacy is still 11 minutes from the house. The insurance money was reinstated to the policy's joint beneficiary framework. After legal costs, the net figure was $1.87 million. I did not spend it impulsively. I had a meeting with a financial advisor, not Stewart, a different person, someone Naomi recommended and made decisions that are still resolving in the way financial decisions do when you make them carefully. My consultancy has 4 new clients this year. I work mornings. I cook dinner properly most evenings, which I had not done during the illness years. Not enough time, not enough capacity. I had forgotten that I was good at it. Petra came over for dinner last month and said, "You made this?" about a specific dish I had been perfecting for 3 weeks. I said yes. She had seconds. I was pleased by this in a way that was completely out of proportion to the stakes. The folder is in the filing cabinet. The pharmacy receipt is still the first thing you see. I still think about the cold bathroom floor and the small laugh at 2:47 a.m. I think I always will. Both things were real. I have decided that holding both things does not make me naive. It makes me accurate. Some people plan the exit while you're still in the room doing everything they need. The receipt is still in the folder. It has the time on it. That time is the whole story.